Motivated reasoning. What is motivated reasoning? It's a cognitive and social response in which individuals consciously or unconsciously allow emotion loaded motivational biases to affect how new information is perceived. And then another definition says motivated reasoning theory suggests that reasoning processes, information selection and evaluation, memory encoding, attitude formation, judgment and decision making are influenced by motivations or goals. Motivations are desired end states that individuals want to achieve. So, I think that motivated reasoning happens all the time, and it can happen especially when someone's been thinking about something a lot, watching a lot of YouTube videos, reading a lot of articles, and just generally getting down a certain rabbit hole or way of thinking, and then trying to grind that axe out in the real world in certain conversations or just with whoever they may be talking to. And it's something I've encountered quite a bit, is that sometimes people have like an argument that's been going on in their own head, that they've picked up from somewhere else, some newspaper or something. And then they want to play that argument out because for whatever reason it's very satisfying, it's very, makes them feel good, it's kind of like an itch perhaps, and to have an argument with somebody and win based off of what they might set that other person up to be, through whatever assumptions they're making. It can be like a very tempting thing to try and go around and smash people with a hammer, because that's what Maslow's hammer talks about. It's a phrase: if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But basically, it's the same thing. It's like a lot of people will do this. They will kind of get really stuck on something and then go around trying to smash everybody with their hammer that they've built up, and it's a problem for sure. People get really mad, people get really angry, and very quickly they lose sight of kind of whether or not there was any constructive purpose to a discussion. It's mainly just to vent some anger or some frustration, and yeah, it can be a pretty bad thing. I have noticed it happens a lot. It's happened to me a few times, but particularly it'll happen if you question any kind of broader culturally accepted narrative around anything, and yeah, it's a real problem. People just generally don't think for themselves about everything because it's not possible. we really have to outsource a lot of our opinions to what we see and hear from other people. And that's fine, because we can't all become experts on every single subject. It would be impossible. But the thing is that some people get really caught up in essentially what is a narrative around a certain topic, and then that thing that I'm describing can happen, because once people are stuck on something, it's very difficult to kind of get unstuck off of that, especially when it comes to things that are like really deeply held. You know, if you believe something and it's really deeply held, and it's, you know, grounded in some sort of negative feelings, and one of those feelings can just be that you are very angry at people who think the other way, or who don't understand maybe how you may be thinking about something. And so once again, the need or the feeling is to kind of create that argument that's been going on inside your head out in the real world. And yeah, it happens quite a lot, and it really makes for a lot of apprehension and tension out in the world, because a lot of people don't want to be that kind of punching bag, or a lot of people don't want to be baited into something that, you know, is a losing proposition, and that is arguing, like discussing something and then it turning into an argument, and then it devolving into something where both people are kind of just rolling around in the mud, calling names, you know. But it can happen quite a lot. And that is just because most people aren't, you know, that expert in things. We do have to go by what we hear from the news, from the media, from someone that we may trust, you know, celebrity figure, expert figure, you know, somebody that we watch online or something. And we don't have the time, we don't have sometimes even the mental ability to do the hard math, the hard science, the hard experiments for ourselves, right? Because that takes a long time. It can take years. It can take years and years and years. So, once again, most people really have to go with what feels best, you know, choose something to go along with, and go with it, because yeah, we need to have it feels like a position on so many issues and so many topics, and that can be difficult. It can be difficult to pick a position on complex topics. And so the reasons and the ways that people pick positions, you know, if it's not really all too well informed or logical. It doesn't have to be either, but a lot of times it can just be, you know, part of a personality choice. related to a personality choice. And yeah, can be really wrapped up in identity. And because of that, because things can get really wrapped up into identity, they can just be like these super sensitive areas where people can get really, really mad, they can get really, really upset. And that's because identity is at stake. For a lot of people, it feels like their identity is at stake. Or it feels like an attack on their identity, like a very personal attack on somebody's identity, if you simply just don't agree with them. So that is, it is a problem. Maslow's hammer is very common. It's very, very common. And I think that it would be nice if people could have more long conversations where they really got to talking about some of the things they believe and maybe why they believe them, and without getting super angry, having some passion in what they're saying, but not just putting other people down, because that's all too common, and it just doesn't get anywhere. It doesn't really help anything. So yeah, I think I would love to see that. I would love to see some more long form discussions about things in a civil manner, and I think that's really enjoyable too. I think it's one of the most enjoyable things, actually, is doing those long form discussions, taking some very good ideas, putting them on the table, and just going back and forth about them, seeing what you understand versus what I understand, and building the blocks of each idea, taking apart certain words and figuring out what they mean, and then wrapping them back up together and using them within these broader concepts, broader ideas, and looking at data, searching the internet, being balanced, to take multiple sources, to use things like the preponderance of data appropriately, figuring out what does it mean to assess an idea for its strengths and for its weaknesses. It's funny. It's like that doesn't really get talked about as much anymore, even though I remember learning about that in school, was looking at ideas for their strengths and weaknesses and using their strengths and weaknesses to evaluate them compared to other ideas, and understanding that all ideas have strengths and weaknesses, and being okay with that, and then just letting the best one rise to the top. But we don't get that very much anymore. We get a lot of very quick thinking. We get a lot of very distracted thinking. We get a lot of ideas that don't really get the chance to even grow or get off the ground. And then we get a lot of arguments that have been taking place in somebody's head that get sort of triggered or get pushed out because somebody just really wants to um, play that argument out that they've been having probably in their head with somebody else. It's so common too. It's so common. I notice the sort of the very scoffer, mocker type of argument that a lot of people have. A lot of people are very cynical, very bitter, and so everything has to fit into kind of a type of scoffing type of way of thinking and describing things. And it's really sad because it moves, it pushes anything that has value into like kind of a little box, and you never get to really go into that box and pull everything out with somebody, because there's no good discussions. It's not easy. People are afraid of them. People are afraid to bring up something that might be controversial or sensitive or a vulnerable topic, because it's tough, I guess, and either side will kind of shut it down very quickly. And it does damage, I think, public discourse to be like that. I think public discourse is not looking good, at least in Canada, but I think in many other places as well. Yeah, and I think it speaks to that people are kind of on different levels, or within different bubbles, within, splintered realities, or epistemic bubbles, or different worldviews, or umwelts, perceptual bubbles. But that those perceptual bubbles, it used to never really be such a big deal, but now those perceptual bubbles or splintered realities or whatever, they're becoming more and more separate. And it is getting harder and harder to crack them open and come together on certain issues, discuss other issues in a healthy way. It's getting really, really difficult to do that. And I think it's got to do with emotional exhaustion, I think. Partly due to the internet, I would say, but also because of just how many advanced ideas and concepts are getting pushed toward everybody. And part of that's good, but I think, like I said, it's making people very much further and further apart in their thinking, and it's very difficult for people to come together and really discuss those ideas that we all love, that we all really enjoy taking a bite of, and that's really a shame. It's a sad thing, and it's kind of a lonely thing as well. And it's a tribal thing too, because people will really fight to be identified with a certain idea if it gives them something within a group. And it can be really self-reinforcing, because it does feel very, very good to be a part of a group, and to defend that group, in all of its ideas. And that can be, well, bad for discourse, I would say. But yeah, just in general, people don't have the time or the mental, and emotional stamina like they used to. I think a lot of that is due to having so much individualized content and so much ability to go into content, and align, and because the content is becoming so much more high quality and splintered or finely tuned toward niche interests and niche ideas, you can find something to back up anything that you want, or someone who will agree with anything on the computer. And yeah, it can be very, very bad, I would say, because it's not very balanced. Like I said, there's pros and cons to many, many ideas, and when you don't really get a chance to have an open forum, especially in the real world, it can lead to a lot of frustration, and fermenting or festering of certain ideas, because you're not able to talk about a lot of things in the world. You kind of get that blank stare, or people will seem very upset or uncomfortable because people know that certain things are just sort of like off limits, which is totally fine, but to have certain things off limits, but it's more and more like people are dead scared, or either dead scared or ready to get very angry about certain topics, and in a manner like Maslow's hammer, like I mentioned earlier. And just most people just don't want to deal with it. Most people just don't want to deal with it, for good reason. It's really exhausting. But I just thought I'd bring that whole thing up, because I do think it is a problem for discourse in public, in the workplace, in many settings. So, and I think it makes people, it's to the detriment of people to not talk about things, because we don't really get that chance to mature and to grow in society very, very easily. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to discuss ideas, and I hope that more good discussions can take place, without so much fear about speaking freely.